like for me, like research was the hardest part of it because I wanted it to be very well researched to where, like, this sounds bad, but like if a wilderness bro was to come up and be like, this isn't possible, I would be like, bet it is, and here's the research.
Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps, books, beverages, and author conversations. I'm Bree, always ready to dive into new fantasy worlds and take a step back in time.
I'm Megan, part critic, always team physical copy, and forever chasing good thrillers and a great plot twist.
I'm Emily, your resident mood reader who thrives on chaos questions and lively book chats.
And I'm Jordan, equal parts heart, humor, and high-functioning caffeine addict. I come with coffee in hand, wine on standby, and a Gilmore Girls quote for every occasion.
Cheers!
Cheers!
Welcome back to Narratives and Nightcaps. Today I'm joined by debut author Ashley Peters, whose new novel, A Lyrical Dystopian Tale, paints a haunting portrait that challenges readers to rethink perspectives on society and resilience. In Stasis is a story of grit, survival, and unyielding human spirit. Hi, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I've been looking forward to this for months now. I feel like this has been on our schedules for a very long time.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I know it's been on there, and I've been anticipating it as well.
Me too. Well, to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit more about what your nightcap pairing is for today?
So I think the perfect nightcap pairing for this would be a coffee with like a bourbon flavor to it. So there are coffees that like have a bourbon flavor without actually having bourbon in it. That's perfect. If you're like, no, that would keep me up all night, you could add some actual bourbon to it, and hopefully that'll help you sleep.
I think I did something like that for my dad for Christmas. I got him like a bourbon flavored coffee for Christmas a couple of years ago, and he loved it. He thought it was so good.
Yeah, there's like a few different places that make it, and it's so good. And wherever we have it, I feel like we like ration it out.
Yes.
I feel like that's the perfect, you're in the woods in this book, and sometimes it's dreary, and it's, I don't know, just feels like the right amount of like comfort, but somehow a little bit of ruggedness.
It does, and it kind of gives me this like smoky, haunting element to it too, a little bit. So
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's a great pairing. And to your point, then if you really want to make it a true nightcap, add a little bit of actual bourbon to it if you want to. Very good. Okay, well, we were just talking. I know that you live in Austin. I haven't been in a long time, but I used to be in that area, love that area. So, what is one of your favorite things to do or recommend for people when they visit Austin?
There's a lot of really amazing vintage stores, and like, yes, there's the ones that are very popular, and you'll see them all over social media. But also, I think just going through some of the random ones that don't necessarily get the social media love. You can just find some very unique things there that are just anything from clothing to like ceramics and just like oddities. So it's fun. And then we are not lacking on our plethora of coffee shops and bookstores. So like that's all really great. If you're outdoorsy, there's the trail that goes all around like Zilker or like Labor Lake. And that's pleasant to walk. And there's Barton Springs, which is like a natural fed spring. It's the same temperature all year round. It's a little chilly, but it is really refreshing. On the other side, there's Barkin Springs, so you can take your dogs to it. It's the same water. It's just not like manicured.
Okay, I've been to Barton Springs. Gosh, that was a long time ago, but there's so much to do. I love Austin. I would actually love an excuse or a reason to get back there. And the vintage shopping sounds like something I really missed out on when I used to visit a lot, but I was younger at the time, so didn't have that opportunity, but very cool. Well, speaking of fur babies and dogs, I know you have 3. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what is one word you would use to describe each of them?
Our oldest is Bentley. He, I think, would be, we'll say agreeable. Just like he is the most like down for anything dog. So like I think like the first kid always spoils us. Our second oldest is Frederick. He is, oh gosh, one word. He, he's a little sassy in the best way. He's a Chiweenie, so it's like you have to earn his love. Like it takes like a good week for him to trust people and like love them, but then he's your best friend. And then Bruno is our youngest, and he's just goofy. Like he is like a pug, we think Chihuahua mix, and he will just have like, we'll call it noodle tail, and sprint around the house, and his little curly tail like becomes floppy like a noodle. And he's just the goofiest dog.
Oh, I love that. You've got a range of personalities, it sounds
We
like.
do. Yes. Yeah. Bruno's actually on my lap right now.
Oh, hi,
I was gonna say,
Bruno.
do you want to make an appearance? No.
Oh my gosh. Hi.
He just like sleeps on my lap when I'm like working.
Oh, that's my dog. He's like, Mom, who are you talking to?
Yeah. Are you cheating?
Yeah, he's like, I heard that voice. That voice is normally reserved for me. So
Yeah.
he's gonna get all excited. Hi, yes, I see you too. I know that you love to travel. You've also lived in more than the US, right? You've lived in another country. Where else have you lived?
So originally I'm from Ohio, but we moved to San Diego and then to Japan, in DC, and we made our way out to Austin. My partner used to be in the Navy, so that's what kind of took us to those different places. But we lucked out because in Japan we actually lived off base, so we had like a real Japanese house that we were renting and actual Japanese neighbors. So we kind of got out of like the fishbowl of like a mini America, and got to experience what it was like being in a Japanese house with, like just some very interesting gadgets and some that I'm like, oh, I wish we had that here.
That's so cool. I would love to visit. I've never been
Mhm.
to that part of the world, but Japan is pretty high up on my list of places I would like to go. What's a dream travel destination that you would love to get to?
That's like, there's such a long list.
Oh, same. So don't worry.
There's such a long list. I think like an adventure place, I've always like wanted to go and like hike Machu Picchu and like just
I'm
spend a
going
lot
to
of time there. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Like just and like do all the things there. I think that's always been like somewhere in the list. I think from a like non-adventure, I mean, I guess a non-rugged viewpoint, I've always wanted to go to France and like specifically like Paris and obviously go through the lavender fields and, you know, all of the, I don't know, like the art, just that. I run. So part of me is like, I could go and like do the Paris Marathon and then just hang out for a few weeks and see all the good stuff.
Yes. Oh, you should. That would be amazing. I've been to Paris, but I've always wanted to go back to France and explore it some more. I feel like there's so much to see. I'm going to Peru this fall, barring nothing super crazy
Yeah.
happens. Um, we have that booked. So stay tuned. I'll let you know how it goes.
I will definitely be like creeping on socials. Like it just looks like such an incredible like experience and all the little micro experiences within it too.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So we are flying in and out of Cusco,
Mhm.
and like we need to acclimatize for a couple of days. So I mean, we're going to go stay in a little village nearby outside of Cusco. I
Mhm.
don't an hour or so out of the way. So I'm even really looking forward to that, just
Yeah.
to and I mean the little we have I would say it's probably the equivalent of a B&B here. The
Mhm.
little place that we're staying there, just everything looks so colorful and natural and bright. We're really excited, and then we're hiking, and we're just gonna do a day trip to Machu Picchu because it's that'll be the end of our trip and after our
Mhm.
like multi-day hike. But I'm
Yeah.
excited
Yeah.
to see it. It'd be very cool.
Yeah. I'm sure that's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty much all I think about. So the second you said Peru, I was like, oh no. Oh no, I won't shut up about it. Um, when you are writing, what is one thing, maybe there are multiple things that you have to have next to you?
Um, I think for me, like one of the big things, honestly, is I write a lot in silence. Like I don't put on music or anything. I can write when there's a TV show on, if it's a show that doesn't like suck me in. Which sometimes like you don't realize until the show's going, and I'm like, well, nothing's getting done with this segment. Um, but yeah, I think really for me, it's like having the silence. I have like a notebook for each thing that I'm writing that kind of has like if the timeline, I guess, of it. It has like the progression of the timeline. So there's a novel I'm working on right now that's a little bit of like an Odyssey type journey. And so there is the progressions where it's like, okay, day 1, day 2, like how many days it takes to get from point A to point B. So I like having that nearby so I can reference and be like, okay, hold up. What, like, it's August 1st in this story right now. Where are we within like the timeline? Because if not, I'll just put a placeholder, and I hate putting placeholders. So
No, that makes sense. And I hear you on that because I have had even not writing, but just a lot of reading to do lately. And I can read, and my husband, I don't mind if like it doesn't bother me normally if he watches TV while I'm
Mhm.
reading there too. But sometimes something gets me sucked in. And so he started Paradise, the show on
Okay.
Hulu. And that I was like, I can't read while you're watching that because I
Yeah.
get so engrossed in the plot and what's happening. So I feel that. If you could meet any author in person, dead or alive, who would you like to meet?
So one I haven't met would be Margaret Atwood, and I would
I love
like
it.
it would be so hard to not fangirl, like in full transparency, but it would be a dream, I think, to meet her and even just to talk about even non-book things or anything, just to talk about anything. I feel like she would have very interesting insight and probably some very like fun, like little quips and remarks.
She would be, I totally agree with you, even not talking about books, but just the opportunity for 5 minutes to talk to her
Hmm.
about anything would be amazing, or to sit down and have a cup of coffee with her would be
Yeah.
incredible. I loved what you said on your website about, why you fell in love with books. So for people that haven't has had a chance, can you tell us a little bit more about where your passion came from for books?
Yeah. So for me, like as a kid, I was always a really big reader. I would just throw myself into books, and I think then I started creating these just like stories, like just telling stories, writing little stories, not really giving a whole lot of thought to it. So I just like the idea of you could explore kind of like all these different worlds and times and other people's lives and perspectives by just going to a book. I grew up in a very like, well, first part of my childhood was like a very rural area, and the second half was like a more suburban area, but it was relatively like uneventful and a lot of homogeny. And books for me were a way to kind of escape things that I felt like were boring and dive into this whole other world. And so now with writing, I enjoy being able to offer people that escape, but also like, especially with In Stasis, if people feel stressed about the world, I tell them like you will be, I think, less stressed by the end of it. And that and it feels like it's like role playing a scenario kind of a thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better about things. And books have done that for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they offer us an opportunity, like you said, to escape or to experience, to learn new perspectives, to have empathy
Hmm.
for different perspectives and different people too. There's so many different reasons to read and to love books. But In Stasis, let's talk about it. So it released earlier this year.
Yes.
For listeners that haven't had a chance to dive into your debut, what is the story about?
So in Stasis, our main character Jessie is forced to choose to flee to the forest with her dog Janice after facing a betrayal to avoid arrest under this new authoritarian government. I tell everyone that she is not a survivalist or a Bear Grylls. She is a like let's go glamping and then come home and have takeout. So now she has to figure out how to survive literally in the wilderness, but also who to trust while the government is still trying to close in on people who are resisting.
Okay, my immediate question, there's so many things, but could you survive in the wilderness like Jessie?
I think I could do if I had her set up, because I will like you find this very early on, like she had a vacation rental and so she's using that as like her outpost. So she's not like with no shelter truly, that level. I think her level of survival I could do. I think the aspect of being truly out there, like I think if you had to, yes, you could do it, or I could do it. I would probably enjoy it even less. I hate being like wet and cold, and those areas you're just going to be wet, cold, and damp because that happens. Whereas like a structure provides like some relief from that.
Yeah, she does have a solid setup to go to there at the beginning. I think too, I mean, not just the two of us, but people in general, I think we're all like a lot stronger and a lot more capable if we were put in those situations. My big thing is that my dog is not at all like Janice.
Yeah.
And, he would 100% give me away. Or just he's very protective, he's very loyal, and he will not do anything if you come up to him, but he will make it known if he doesn't know who you are or if he just hears something. So that's like a running joke, well, sort of joke between my husband and I, is I'm always like, I give him full permission to just abandon us if the time comes, because I'm like, you'll make it. You'll make it. You've got great instincts. You're one with fishing and all of that. I'm like, you got it. We, on the other hand, and I'm like, and I'm not leaving him. He's going everywhere with me. But so she has a wonderful companion in this journey too. Well, it's been out for a few months now. Can you just tell me a little bit about what the past few months have looked like? What have been a few highlights for you?
The past few months have been wild, just because I think like all this whole process is new, like being a debut author. And so each experience is new. And I don't know, like I'm taking it all in. But we had our book launch party, and then I've done a book fair, like adult book fair festival up in Dallas, which that was a ton of fun. And I was like, I have no concept of what to expect. But book sales were good and everyone was so nice. And I was like, this is amazing. I love it. We've done some other signings at like some bookstores, everything from like Indie to Barnes & Noble. So that's been really great. And just figuring out, really getting like, it sounds silly, but like the pitch down, which I feel like at this point I'm like, okay, I have like my 3 sentences that really do encapsulate it. And never underestimate the power of freebies, like bookmarks. We have one, there's a bookmark that says that man is about as useful as an appendix. And that is like, it's a quote from the book, but I jokingly say it's like my litmus test, because if you read that and you chuckle or you like it in any way, you'll like the main character, you'll vibe with the book. If you have a strong opposite reaction, you might be on the side of the bad guys. So there's that. But if
you have a strong opposite reaction, you probably haven't listened to other episodes of this podcast.
Yes, yeah. It's like I'll have that bookmark, and if I see people because people will kind of loiter out, and if I see them read it and laugh, like I'll know. I'm like, okay, you're my person. Like, please come over this way. But yeah, so all of that's been really great, and I think since then we have another book festival coming up in May. So it's just been very busy, and I think the book festivals have been super fun because it is very high intensity, a lot of energy, a lot of people, but everyone's just so excited to read books that kind of takes me back to like Little Kids Classic Book Fair Day, because I was the person who went in there and was like, I'm like supermarket sweeping, like I'm taking all the books. So it's, I don't know, that there's some aspect of that feels like wholesome. I don't know, it makes you feel like a little kid again. So I think that's like been one of my favorites.
It does. It is. I loved the Scholastic Book Fairs. Those were my days. I
Yeah.
lived for those as a kid. But there is something about because well, writing and reading can both feel very isolating and maybe lonely at times. And when you go to a book festival, no matter what it is, to be surrounded, even if you're not talking to them, if you're just going on by yourself and exploring, just to be surrounded by so many people that you know are like-minded and just love it just as much as you do. It's really special. So it's awesome to see that you've been able to do so many different events like that. I can't even imagine as a debut author how exciting that would be. And like you said, you're just trying to take it all in.
Yeah, just taking it all in, photographing everything, kind of jokingly, like very unapologetically, like I was just doing selfies at the one in Dallas. And I was like, I don't care if this looks stupid. Like I am documenting every single moment of this. And obviously the book community is so cool that no, it's not like somebody's gonna be like, oh, that's cringy. And I don't care. But
I think be cringe because anyone in the book community and readers like they don't find it cringy at all. Other people on the outside maybe,
right.
but we don't really.
We don't
Yeah.
care.
I was just talking with one of my co-hosts yesterday though, because she's going to a book festival this Saturday and we were kind of prepping for all of that. And we were just talking about how like the last book festival that I went to out in February, I go, it's so, I have no issue talking with anybody in the book community. I mean, the second I landed, there were like authors and everybody that you could see going to the book festival, but it was awkward on the plane when you're sitting next to some random man who goes, so why are you here? And I
Yeah.
was like, well, yeah, I go, he said, he goes, are you here for fun or work? And I was like, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, well, like, what are you doing? And then that's immediately, I'm like, you're not my audience.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to a book festival. And I will say, he was very nice. He was very kind. It wasn't weird or anything, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I know the book community and I know that it's not cringy within that space, but the second I'm sitting next to a stranger on a plane who probably hasn't picked up a book since who knows when, I'm like, this probably comes off very cringe, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. For In Stasis, when did you officially put pen to paper that first time?
So it was December of, gosh, okay, we were in 2024. Yes? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was then, and then the writing process, like the first draft was done in like 4 months. And then it was just like the back and forth of like revisions and editing and all of that goodness until like September, beginning of October-ish. Yeah.
Holy cow, you did this really fast.
Yeah. It was one of those where it's like I had the idea in my head and I was talking to my partner and because of like the world and stuff going on. And I made the comment where I'm like, I don't understand why there aren't more stories where if things go really south, people don't just like disappear into the woods. Like the national parks are massive. Like easily people could live there and you would never know. And then I remembered that there was a story from World War II where a town did live in the forest. And I think they made a movie about it. And I was like, oh, well, okay, so it has been done. Just there isn't a lot of like really like fiction about it. And then we got into the conversation about like survivalists and that whole kind of subgenre of like books and movies. And I, of course, like my brain went to, well, there's no like women who are doing it. It's always a male lead. And once that thought got in my head, I was like, I feel like I need to get the words out. And so we, a lot of times for like New Year's and 4th of July, we'll go out to like a cabin or something where there's not a lot of fireworks because of our dogs. And so I was literally in this little like glamping cabin. And I'm like, we're just going to see. So like the opening, like first chapter where she is like talking about like the wind and the trees and this and that, I was literally looking at trees and wind and was just like, okay, we're gonna see what comes out.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's also incredible. Well, with that said, that makes a lot of sense, but you chose a very lyrical style of writing for this story, which from when I was reading it, I was like, this definitely adds to the feelings of isolation and reflection, not only as a reader, but then for Jesse. Was that a natural style of storytelling for you, or did you find yourself having to tap into those experiences or a certain mindset to really get into that style?
Yeah. So for me, it is a little bit more of like my natural style of writing. I enjoy books that are highly descriptive, where I feel like I am right there with the person. So it that kind of came out naturally. There were parts where, because I wanted people, I say like, so much of writing is I have a running movie in my head and I need to get that movie of what I'm seeing into words on paper so that when you read it, you conjure up the same movie. So there were parts where I had to sit and kind of like take a moment and like envision, okay, if I was walking through this space, what would I feel? What would I see? What would I hear? And then how do those things contribute to like the overall tone that we're going with?
Sure.
Um, Things like a lot of like the weather and things like that will play with like encouraging the tone of things. If you go through and notice, like a lot of the book does take place during kind of like mid fall through mid spring, because where she is, that's when it's going to be like cold and wet and not necessarily like a beautiful summer day to go camping or glamping. So I wanted to really like drive that home. But yeah, so it was a little bit of both.
Okay. What would you say was, from the writing perspective, what was the biggest challenge that you faced? Was it anything related to the development of the story? Was it part of your research? Because I would love to talk to you about your research too. Your note at the beginning, well, I at the beginning of the book, like you mentioned, there are some certain years, some time periods and places in history that influenced this parts of this story, fictionalized versions of it, while acknowledging how history can often look very
Yeah.
much like the present in some instances. So, what did your research process look like to you? Sorry, I just rambled off like
Yeah.
10 questions to you in one, because
Yeah.
that's just how my brain happens to work
Well,
sometimes.
so, like for me, like research was the hardest part of it, because I wanted it to be very well researched to where, like, this sounds bad, but like if a wilderness bro was to come up and be like, this isn't possible, I would be like, bet it is. And here's the research, like, here's the receipts. To where I was looking up, like, okay, if you had a tree house, like for like glamping, and it's this ish size and this ish weight, like what type of tree size and like type could hold it? Does that exist where I want this to be placed? And so there was like that type of like cross sectionality. That was really like a dense research, because I don't build tree houses. All the trees look really strong, and I'm
What?
like,
Actually,
you
you
know,
don't?
like, so I'm like diving into that. There was a lot of research for historical aspects, because I did want to weave in how history sometimes does, either it does repeat itself or it feels like it's repeating itself. And so I could weave in those details. Um, and then, yeah, just making sure that everything was really solid. I am really lucky because my dad was a paramedic, so I could tap into him for like a lot of the medical things. There were some things like I was talking to my partner about because of his like ex-military experience. And so just I wanted to make sure that everything was solid, because nothing kills me more than when a book or a movie have like too many plot holes, or things where I'm like, your own logic isn't holding up. So I wanted to make sure it would hold up to like, my own criticalness.
Yeah. Oh, you're making me think about, because I'm always fascinated when I either read interviews or talk to people that have written historical fiction, and I think a lot about the research that went into that. And I would almost say this is the near the same in
Yeah.
terms of the level of research, not only from the survival perspective, the historical elements, the medical things, like you said, having some of your own resources to help with that is so helpful. But like, I would love to see your Google search history
Oh, like
too.
Google search history is ridiculous. And like yeah, I mean when you read it, like there's a part like I was looking up stuff and I'm like, this could land me on like a watch list. But yeah, because I was just like, I like, would this logistically work? Like I've seen like I have other kind of pop culture references. I'm like, but is this a real maybe thing?
I feel like I
Yeah.
know which scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
I do. Okay. I saw you are the first person that I've ever seen use the term cozy dystopia,
Yeah.
which I immediately loved it. But for everybody listening, what does cozy dystopia mean to you, and how would you say
Yeah.
it's included in Stasis?
So through some of it honestly came from some of our like ARC readers and people who were helping me throughout it. Like somebody used that phrasing and we were talking about it. I'm like, oh, that is really perfect because it there is a thread of hope throughout the whole book. And I tell people, I'm like, you will end up less depressed at the end than what you are when you're watching the news currently. So it's not just doom and gloom or anxiety in like a dystopia. Um, but there are like all these moments that feel cozy or they feel relatable, where she's doing things that are like a little mundane or it feels comforting, where she's like in this glamping setup and she's kind of referring to, like, oh, the puzzle that she's done a million times or something. And it's those moments that feel very normal, but because of the juxtaposition to everything else that's going on, it creates like a tension, which I enjoyed because again, I thought it kind of separated the rest of the world and all the things that are going on from her world of like this little isolation. So it created a little bit of like a yo-yo effect. And I loved because when I was writing it, it was interesting when I talked to people about it because I'm like, well, it is dystopian, but it's not like exactly like how you think of some of other dystopians. And it was hard to put kind of that into words. So I'm always really grateful for the readers who had like somebody said that word and I was like, oh, that is perfect. Or someone said like through topian, which is just it's a dystopian for a time because of a circumstance, but themes of resilience and resistance and hope. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly where we are.
Kind of on a similar note, one thing that I feel like would be helpful for readers is, are there any titles that you would use for comparison? I actually saw that you posted a few and I was like, oh yeah, 100%. Like Wild, I think was one.
Yeah.
And that definitely to me seemed like a great comparison. Are there other ones that you tell readers, hey, if you really liked this, whether it's a piece of literature or a film or anything that you know that they would also enjoy in Stasis?
So I said Wild. Even if you're not like an outdoorsy person, if you just resonate with the character who is very resilient, and like stubborn and, just like, I'm going to figure it out. There's a lot, like it has that. I said Parable of the Talents, which is the second book, like after Parable of the Sower. Just because Parable of the Talents is more in a wilderness type setting and it is more of like surviving in an already existing like bad situation versus and I'm not gonna give anything away, don't worry. Like Parable of the Sower, it's a more active collapse of things, both really amazing. And then I said Leave the World Behind, which great book, great I think movie. There's a lot of political intrigue with it where I enjoyed that because in Stasis there are some things like that, the government's doing or people are doing, and some of those things get answered, and some of them you have to speculate because if you were in this scenario, you wouldn't necessarily have every answer perfectly wrapped up with a bow. And so I enjoyed that kind of like forcing people to like, you have to decide I guess, a little bit of the why or the critical thinking of, we might just not know exactly, but we're leading you to think this because that's probably the case. Um,
Which
I
such is life.
Yeah.
And which I know, like, and that's something that I think, well, I'm going to say we all, and that's a huge generalization. Like, on one hand, I love it in literature, but that's a relatable thing too, because
Mhm.
there are so many things that we don't have answers for. We might have some sort of, like, we might have our own interpretation or some speculation about it, but we don't have concrete
Yeah.
proof, or maybe proof isn't the right word, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And like, so yeah, such is life in any sort of situation like this, and for a speculative novel.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted people to be able to like come to a conclusion without it being spoon fed to them. I think that readers are smart. I'm like, I promise you, it's like, for anybody listening, I'm like, it is wrapped up enough. You will be satisfied. I didn't just like rip the rug out and be like, bye, we're done.
Although you had me a little worried for a while.
Yeah. I definitely, the original ending was like more ambiguous, and I was like, okay, no, we need to firm it up more. I think too, I like, if you go on my social media, I use a lot of the music from like Yellow Jackets, because the tension that's in there of just not knowing like what is out there, I liked, because I think if you were alone in the forest, you would feel that tension of like, you don't know what's out there. It could be, just good people. It could be bad people. It could be animals. Like, there could be a storm. There's a million different things that could stress you out.
It's vast, not just in what you can see with your eye, but with the possibilities, good and bad,
Yeah.
that are out there. Absolutely. So you self-published this
Mhm.
debut, and I want to talk a little bit more about, why did you choose to indie publish? I think that it is a talk about resilient and people and like determination and perseverance. I just have so much respect for indie authors. And two, because to see, it's so admirable to see like how much you are doing to talk about your book, to connect with other readers, to come on this podcast, everything. So can you talk a little bit about, let's start with like why you chose to self-publish the book?
Yeah. So part of the reason was because, since it is like, it's near future, but I put it in like a kind of diary type style, so we do know dates. Um, the real world was being a little crazy, and I was concerned it was going to outpace the book. It was like the movie Don't Look Up. There was so much hype, and then by the time it came out, there were so many other things in the real world that had happened. It almost felt like it wasn't as crazy as what people said it was going to be. So I wanted to make sure it was out there. And so it didn't feel like, for readers who didn't realize when it was written, that it was like I'm writing things after the fact. Um, and so like that was a big part. The other big thing was that there's no romance in the book. Like, Jessie is out there by herself with her dog. I didn't, and like, love romance novels for like those who like that's their vibe. Um, I didn't want it to be a thing where, because romance as a genre is doing so well, to where a publisher was like, we need to get, like, at least the temptation or the thought of a significant other. Um, Partially because I just felt like the story didn't need it. And also because like we see it in real world, where a woman can work really hard at like a corporate job, but the guy who's kind of like near her can get like shrapnel praise for her accomplishment. So I don't want a guy in there doing it. Like, you can give all the praise to Janice because he definitely keeps Jessie sane, but I just didn't want her, like, her glory to be like stolen.
Absolutely. No, that makes so much sense. There's a creative control of your story is really
Mhm.
important. It is very, very important. And I was curious too, because I know another author who totally different, I mean, story, but also a speculative novel set in the somewhat near future. And
Yeah.
that was one thing when I talked to him about it, he was like, it was really hard because by the time that book published,
Mhm.
I mean, so much had changed from when he initially started writing it. So I could see that being a huge challenge. What have you learned about the publishing process then, and about yourself throughout all of this?
Yeah. So I learned that editing takes way longer than what you expect. Um, I think I thought, because I wrote the original draft in like 4 months, I was like, okay, great, we're gonna send this off, we'll do the edits. Like, it just, what I did not expect it to take like so much more time. But it was a whole process, because obviously I'm doing my edits. I sent it off to an editor to be professionally edited. In my process, because your brain likes to fill in gaps, I went through and I read the entire story like line by line backwards to like force your brain to slow down.
That's so good.
It slows you down so much. So that was a pain, as was formatting, just because I am the person where I'd rather be like out in the woods than dealing with like technology. So during the formatting process, I was like, why is this not doing what it says it should be doing? And, just figuring it out, because it was the first time. And now I'm like, oh, future times will be easier. I know now. So that's like the silver lining of it all. I think for like learning about myself, for whatever reason, growing up, I didn't really think of being an author as like a viable career option. And I don't know, I thought maybe because like your own stories, I just felt like my stories were silly. Like, how would this actually be a book? And then to do it, and then to hear other people's like reception of it, I think has changed that mindset a lot for me. Especially it's people who like, I don't know them, and I'm like, that's amazing and weird, and okay, like maybe this is real. So that, I think, has shifted my mindset a lot on that.
That's incredible. I don't have anyone reading my words, but I just can relate to you, even when like a total stranger says something about the podcast and they're like, oh, you introduced me to so many different authors. I picked up that book because how cool to know how impactful your story has been for other readers out there. That's really, really special.
Yeah, it's been like, that part's been incredible. And then having people talk to you and just be like, oh, this part or this, and I'm like, and they have, they're creating the same like brain movie or brain cartoon, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, like I love this, because yeah, writing it, I was like, I love it. My, like the people who I've talked to seem to love it, so we'll see, because I don't know, and so I'm glad that people have enjoyed it.
You're kind of, just because it's top of mind, you're making me think, and I've been thinking a lot about it with our interview with just authors and writing in general, but Taylor Swift's interview with her music too. She was like, you write it, you put it out there, and then just it's out there, and then like if someone picks it up right away, or 5 years from now, or anything like that. And I just think that books are so similar in that way, and it's going to reach the right people. And so very, very cool. Well, when readers do close this book, if they were to have one feeling, what do you hope it is?
I hope that readers are more open to reaching out to community. And I say that because I think a lot of times when bad things are happening in the world, or if you're just more of a like, I'll do it myself type of person, which like I am.
Guilty.
Yeah, I was gonna say 100%. Like, I'm like, oh no, I got all the groceries one trip. I don't need anybody. I'm good. It'd be a lot easier to have two people do it. But I think for those individuals, like, keep in mind that if you have a community, it is a lot easier to deal with the hard things, whether it's just like, work life hard things or the world hard things. It is so much easier. And without community, you are in isolation. Everything will be worse. And so like, that gives you hope.
Absolutely. I think whether it's the world or personal or your work or a combination of all of the above, when things can feel so heavy, having community, and it doesn't have to be a large community. I think that that's like what's important too, is having just a small community of people that you can trust, that you can rely on and that you can show up and however you need to show up is so, so important to find those people or that person too. So I like that. And even like, I loved when you signed the book, like you kind of made a nod to that with my copy. That was really, really, really sweet. You mentioned that you have a work in progress and we're giving some little hints about it. I don't want to ask too much. I don't want to like put you on the spot to divulge a lot. But what are some themes that you find yourself returning to?
So I definitely often return to themes like climate change themes, environmental themes. I often write things that are critical of people or organizations in power who are maybe mismanaging things. And I do think often, and there's themes of like the resilience and finding your people, finding like yourself in it. Those themes keep kind of coming back. And then, especially in my novels, and I'm writing some short stories that are a little bit more horror versus like just speculative fiction, but they still have very similar themes where it's like, critiques on like I said, like larger entities, critiques on like companies maybe that are not like so great, or just like society's obsession with things that like could be bad. So
oh my gosh, we could talk about that for a very long time. And I'm like, do you need any real world experience? Do you want a person to share on it?
Because writing's a very cathartic thing, and in a world that sometimes feels like you only have so much control, it at least makes me feel like I can put the feelings and the thoughts that are just like all bottled up and onto a page. And I'm like, and I know other people also feel this way. And I know when I read things like that, I'm like, yeah, somebody else like gets it. They're also not okay with whatever kind of a thing.
Well, I mean, talk about community and talk about the blend of that with reading is reading for me, and I know so many others, can often make you feel like you're not alone, no matter what it is. You just know, you're like, I'm not the only person out there that feels this way or thinks this or anything like that. It can be really, really powerful, and to feel like you have community, especially if you're still searching for those people that you can be you and that you can vulnerably, that's really hard to say, like show up and share your thoughts. So well, in addition to your writing and all of your events, you also have your own podcast as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about Novel Nook and what type of space that is?
So me and another individual, Bree, we have the podcast Novel Nook. Essentially, we are interviewing authors and diving into like, their writing process, telling us about their book, kind of attacking it from the perspective of like how they brought their writing to life and what that looks like for them, since every writer is so different. Like I mentioned, like I like to write in silence. I recently found out, because we were doing these interviews for the book festival coming up, that I am not in the majority on that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But our podcast dives into kind of the brain space of writers.
That's really, I think for a lot of aspiring writers, well, as a reader, I personally, I think it's very cool to understand that, because you learn so much, and there's a human behind every story, and there's reasons and there's thought behind all of that. And it's a very neat experience to get to hear from authors on that, on your podcast too. But I would say that's so cool for aspiring writers too, because I think back to one of our early interviews on this podcast was with Allison Larkin, and we were talking a little bit about her process, and I've always remembered how she said, if you're wanting to write, you want to be an author, or you just have, like you said, a movie rolling in your head and you want to put that film into words and put it on paper, hearing other people talk about the different processes kind of gives you permission to either try some of those or to get creative. And I I'm going to totally misquote it because it was like years ago, but I love how she just said there's no right or wrong way to do it. And it's okay to test out the different methods because you might piece together things from 5, 10 different authors, and that creates your unique setup and process that will help you bring that book to life. And I've just always thought about that. And she even said too, you know, and it doesn't have to look the same for every single book. You know, if you have a process for one book and it works really well, but then that process doesn't work for the second book, like you can give yourself permission to try new things. And being able to hear that from other authors is really, really important. And two, especially for newer authors or newer writers, like it's not only inspiring and learning, but just honing your craft and figuring out what that looks like for you to surround yourself with voices who are going through similar experiences or have is really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's for me, like when I first started writing, I definitely like just consumed so much of like, well, how are other authors doing it? Like, what's the way? Because I felt like I was like, I don't want to end up halfway through this and be like, oh, I did this entirely wrong. But it was a thing where it's like certain things resonated, other things didn't, and I figured out what worked for me. And then even from like In Stasis to the novel I'm working on now, yes, they both have obviously like a timeline, but it's vastly different in like the span of time we're covering. And then what I'm working on now, there's certain things that have to happen in an order of events. Whereas with In Stasis, there are certain things that have to happen in a certain order, but there's other things where I'm like, okay, I know I want there to be like a news transmission when she's in the cabin. Does that go before or after this event? If it goes before, is it creating tension here? Like, how's that impacting things? They had more like flexibility. So I had like a cork board with like the Post-its. I know it's crazy. This one doesn't require that as much. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like this is less flexibility, but also less corkboard stuff.
Well, I'm excited to hear more about that one once you're releasing more news to the world on that. I can't wait to hear about your work in progress some more. So Novel Nook podcast, where are some other places that it's best for readers and listeners to connect with you?
So on Instagram and Threads, it's Ashley_Peters_author. And I'm active on there. And then my website is just Ashley Peters Author. And then I don't have a TikTok because I feel like as I say, I feel like the book TikTok world was already like a bullet train moving, and then it got shut down and brought back, and I was like, I'm out. So I'm on Instagram and Threads.
I'm so happy for the people that worked out well for, but yeah, I was like, this is too much. I'll stick to our little space, and that's fine. Well, we will definitely link to all of that on the podcast notes so it's easy for people to connect with you as well. In Stasis is available everywhere now. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a narrative that serves as a poignant reminder of the power of storytelling to reflect and reshape our world, and that challenges us to confront our fears, embrace our inner strength, and find community, like you said.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I'm so glad that we finally got to this after months. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening. The Narratives and Nightcaps podcast is a production of The Craft Co. with intro music created by Remington Haynes.
Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow at Narratives and Nightcaps on Instagram or visit our website, narrativesandnightcaps.com.
Sign up for our newsletter to always know what we're reading next, which authors are joining us on the show, and for extra bookish and beverage info.
Connect with our additional co-hosts, Jordan and Emily, as well.
You can find me on Instagram at Cozy Reads and Sips.
And you can find me on Instagram at books.bottles.
Cheers!
Cheers!